So, Elvis was directed by Baz Luhrmann and stars Austin Butler and Tom Hanks, and it's the story of Elvis Presley, how he became really famous, and his relationship with Colonel Tom Parker, his manager, the ups, the downs, the comebacks, the everything in between, and that's basically the movie. So, this is a movie I was kind of interested in. I've heard a lot about this movie. I thought the trailers were interesting. It looked like a unique approach, but then again, I'm not really a big fan of Baz Luhrmann as a director. I just think his style is too much at times, and I just feel like his style over. I feel like he's more of a style over substance director. Like, I feel like not a lot of his movies have a lot of like great stories, and it's just not really that interesting to me. Or they kind of like downgrade a lot of the stories that he does, like Romeo and Juliet and Great Gatsby and such. So I was definitely not looking forward to this movie as much because of the director involved with it. But went and saw this movie, and it's actually not that bad. I think it actually really does work. It's really well acted, the music's great, even the style, which usually I'm not a big fan of Lerman's style, it actually does work for this movie, I will say. So, what does work? Well, first off, Austin Butler as Elvis Presley. This is a guy who I never really seen before. I think he was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but that's it. He was great in the movie. There were moments in this movie where I didn't see him as an actor playing someone famous. I just saw him as Elvis Presley. And also, he actually does a lot of his own singing throughout, which I thought was actually really good. Um, Also, a lot of Elvis's music is done really well, surprisingly. Again, Austin Butler sings a lot of the songs that Elvis did. And a lot of there's a lot of current music there too, which at first it kind of annoyed me. Like I heard in the trailers, like, oh, really? We're going with current music? But you kind of see in the movie, Elvis kind of samples other musicians' music and then kind of like makes it popular because he's doing his own take on it. So when I hear like the musicians kind of like sampling Elvis' songs and kind of doing the same thing, it's like, okay, that makes sense. It's one of the few times where Lerman takes current music, puts it in a period piece, but it actually does work. Also, the production value's incredible. The cinematography is incredible for the most part. And it kind of like how it takes Elvis seriously. I feel like Elvis has been taken as a joke over the last like 40 years, ever since he died. And you can clearly tell that Lerman has a lot of respect for Elvis, for his life, for his career, and what he's done since then, and like how he's inspired a lot of musicians and like the musicians that inspired Elvis as well. That was really well done. And it doesn't really shy away from a lot of things he did. I mean, it kind of does, but it doesn't like, it at least shows some of the things that he's been kind of accused of doing. And I do like the idea of, again, it shows a lot of the tragedy of his famous life and how, like, even though he was, like, really famous and such, you can clearly tell that he was plagued by a lot of demons and a lot of issues. And again, I do think Lerman's style actually does work for the movie overall. And there are scenes where it's like, okay, he's singing Danger, what was it, Suspicious Minds. And it's clearly, like, with the situation that's going on. And that was, like, one of my favorite scenes from the entire movie. That was really well done. And there are a few other performances that I thought really did work. Mainly Helen Thompson as his mother. I thought she was really good for a brief performance. Kelvin Harrison Jr. was really good for his performance. Cody Smith McPhee has a small role at the beginning. He was fine. He was actually really good for the first like 20 minutes that he's actually in the movie. Also, Alton Mason, I believe that's his name. He portrays Little Richard for like 5 seconds. Great performance for a 5 second role. That's really good. And I do like the idea of like they're kind of like trying to talk about some of the things that, happened at that time, like how controversial Elvis was and kind of relating it to today a bit. It's not as good as like something in say Trial of Chicago 7 from a few years back, but I thought it was really well handled. So, is there anything in this movie that doesn't work? First off, Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is just kind of like in a mix between like being really good and really bad for my take on it. I feel like I just don't like the fact that it's from his perspective. He plays Elvis's manager in the movie, and I just felt like it just didn't work out because they they have a lot of moments where Elvis is by himself talking to other people. Elvis as a kid, and it just doesn't really make sense. Like how would Colonel Tom Parker know how this happened, how this scene went down? if he was not involved at any point. It just doesn't really make sense to me. Also, it has so many cliches of musician biopics, Bohemian Rhapsody, Respect, Walk the Line, Ray. There's a reason why movies like Walk Hard, The Dewey Cox Story parodied movies like this. And yes, I know Elvis did go through all that, and yes, I know a lot of these musicians get into that, but can we just, try something a little different? Like, at least Rocket Man had those things, but at least it was at least a musical. Like a musical, and not like a straightforward biopic. At least this tries to be somewhere between something like Rocket Man and something like Bohemian Rhapsody. And there are some performances in this movie that I just did not care for. Olivia de Jong as Elvis's wife. I thought she was pretty wasted in this movie. I just didn't care for her. I thought she was really bland. Also, Richard Roxburgh, who appears in a lot of Baz Luhrmann movies, he's really bad in this movie. He tries to give an American accent, and it does not work. It's just unbearable to sit through. And there are things about Elvis's life that are kind of glanced over. It's there are moments where maybe you should address that a little bit more. They don't. Oh well. It's not like they shy away from it completely, but they don't elaborate on it. And I feel like that was a wasted opportunity, to be honest. But overall, Elvis is a pretty damn good movie. The performance of Austin Butler is really good. The music's great. The production values are great. Baz Luhrmann's style does work, and he actually does kind of scale it back for the most part, I would say. It does work overall, even though there are some performances that don't work, mainly Tom Hanks, and also how they handle the idea of the biopic, like who to tell it from, and what they show. It kind of doesn't always work, but when it does work, it really hits home. So I'll give Elvis 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So, what did you think of Elvis, and what's your favorite musician biopic? Or who's a musician you want to see a biopic of? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.